On a Wednesday morning in September 1962, a woman in Augusta, Georgia stood in front of her bedroom mirror at 7:45 and put on her good dress. Not her best dress. Her good dress. The one she wore for ordinary days that deserved a little something. She was not going to church. She was not going to a wedding. She was not meeting anyone important. She was going to the grocery store, the post office, and the pharmacy. 3 errands on a Wednesday morning in a small southern town, and she treated the preparation for those 3 errands with the same quiet care she gave everything else that mattered in her life. The earrings went in. The lipstick went on. The shoes, the good ones, not the comfortable ones, came out of the wardrobe. The whole sequence took 25 minutes and felt, to her, like the most natural thing in the world. Today, that same woman would be considered formally overdressed for a job interview. So what exactly changed between her Wednesday morning in 1962 and ours? And what did we lose when we stopped treating ordinary days like they deserved a little something? Here is what the numbers say about where we ended up. A 2022 survey by OnePoll found that the average American now spends less than 13 minutes getting ready in the morning, down from an average of closer to 40 minutes recorded in surveys from the early 1960s. And a separate study by the American Psychological Association found a direct and measurable link between what researchers call enclothed cognition, the psychological effect of the clothes you put on your body, and your levels of confidence, focus, and sense of personal agency throughout the day. In other words, what the woman in Augusta already knew in 1962 without needing a study to tell her, that how you dressed changed how you felt about the day you were walking into, science has now confirmed with considerable precision. We stopped doing the thing that worked, and we replaced it with convenience and called it progress. The reasons go deeper than most people think. The morning ritual that woman in Augusta was performing in 1962 was not vanity. It was not formality for its own sake. It was the physical expression of a value system that had been built over generations and that rested on one foundational idea, that the people you were about to encounter in the course of an ordinary day deserved the respect of your best reasonable effort. The grocery store clerk, the pharmacist, the neighbor you would pass on the way to the post office. None of them were important in the way that a wedding guest or a business partner was important, but they were people. And people in the value system of 1962 America were worth getting dressed for. This was not unique to the American South or to women of a particular class. Across Britain through the same decades, the same principle operated in slightly different forms. The working man who put on his good jacket to go to the pub on a Friday evening, not because the pub required it, but because the people he was going to see there did. The leisure industry's answer to this problem was the invention of a new category of clothing, casual wear, specifically designed for the hours Americans were not working. Sportswear that was not for sport. Relaxed trousers that were not quite formal and not quite informal. The weekend wardrobe, distinct from the weekday wardrobe, that slowly expanded its territory until it began occupying weekdays that had previously belonged to something more considered. By the late 1950s, the category of casual had been so successfully marketed that it had acquired its own moral weight. Casualness was equated with freedom, with leisure, with the good life that post-war prosperity was supposed to deliver. The second force arrived in the late 1950s and reached full effect through the 1960s and 1970s. Before the shopping mall, most Americans who wanted clothing that was not mass-produced bought it from a tailor, a dressmaker, or a small independent shop, where the person selling it knew their customers by name, knew their measurements, and knew what suited them. that relationship between a person and the person who made or selected their clothing, meant that getting dressed carried a social history. The dress the woman in Augusta put on in 1962 had likely been chosen with care, possibly altered to fit her specifically, and represented a small but real investment of money and attention that made it mean something every time she put it on. The shopping mall replaced all of that with volume, anonymity, and speed. When clothing became something you browsed rather than something you chose, when the person selling it knew nothing about you and cared only about the transaction, the emotional relationship between a person and their wardrobe began to dissolve. Clothing became product. And product, unlike a dress chosen by someone who knew your name, is easy to treat carelessly. The third force completed what the mall had begun. Fast fashion, the production model pioneered by international retailers through the 1990s and reaching full saturation by the 2000s, reduced the cost of clothing to the point where the average American was buying roughly 68 garments per year by 2014, according to the American Apparel and Footwear Association. 68 garments. More than one new piece of clothing per week. Items bought for the price of a sandwich, worn twice and discarded. When clothing costs almost nothing and is replaced almost immediately, it is impossible to maintain the psychological relationship with it that the woman in Augusta had with her good dress. You cannot feel the same way about something you spent $3 on and will throw away next month as you feel about something you chose carefully, paid for honestly, and expect to wear for years. The disposability of the garment produced the disposability of the ritual. When the dress means nothing, getting dressed means nothing. And when getting dressed means nothing, the Wednesday morning that was once worth 25 minutes of quiet preparation becomes something you handle in 13 minutes on the way out the door. The fourth and final force is the one that made all the others permanent by giving them a moral justification. Somewhere in the cultural conversation of the late 20th century, comfort displaced respect as the primary virtue of clothing. This did not happen by accident. It happened because a multi-billion-dollar industry, athleisure, performance wear, lifestyle sportswear, needed it to happen in order to grow. The genius of that industry was not that it made comfortable clothing. Comfortable clothing had always existed. Its genius was that it convinced an entire culture that choosing comfortable clothing over considered clothing was not a compromise but a statement. A rejection of superficiality, an embrace of authenticity, a sign that you were too real and too grounded to care about appearances. Comfort became the virtue that made every other clothing choice feel slightly pretentious by comparison. And once that argument had been won, the woman in Augusta's 25 minutes at the mirror stopped looking like quiet self-respect and started looking like unnecessary effort. That reframing is the most expensive thing the athleisure industry ever sold us. And we bought it without realizing we were paying for it with something we could not get back. But there is one more thing we have not talked about yet. The thing that explains not just why we stopped getting dressed, but what we lost inside ourselves when we did. The precise moment the shift became irreversible is identifiable. In 1995, Levi Strauss & Company began promoting a workplace initiative called Casual Friday, a policy that allowed employees to wear denim to work on the last day of the working week. It spread faster than almost any workplace culture change in American corporate history. Within 3 years, Casual Friday had become standard practice across most of corporate America. Within 5 years, it had expanded to Casual Thursday, Casual Wednesday, and in many workplaces, Casual Always. The 5-day suit had become the occasional suit, and then the interview suit, and then the suit hanging in the wardrobe that nobody was quite sure when to wear anymore. That single commercial initiative, promoted by a denim company with a direct financial interest in its adoption, dismantled in less than a decade a daily ritual that had taken generations to build. It did not destroy the ritual through force or through argument. It simply made the ritual optional. And once the ritual became optional, the cultural infrastructure that had kept it in place, the social expectation, the quiet peer accountability, the shared understanding that getting dressed was something you did for other people as much as for yourself, had nothing left to hold it up. You cannot bring back 1962, but you can do 3 things this week that the woman in Augusta did without thinking about them. Choose one ordinary day this week and get dressed for it the way it deserves. Not formally, not expensively, just with the care and intention that says this day is worth my best reasonable effort. Second, the next time you have an errand that feels too small to dress for it anyway, for the people you are going to encounter there rather than for the occasion itself. Third, find one item of clothing you own that makes you feel like yourself when you put it on and wear it on a day that has no reason to be special. Give it a reason. These 3 things will not restore the morning ritual of 1962, but they will begin to restore what that ritual was built on. And that beginning, as the woman in Augusta already knew, starts at the mirror. Somewhere in America this Wednesday morning, someone is standing in front of a mirror deciding whether the day is worth getting dressed for. They will make that decision in 13 minutes or less, in a wardrobe full of comfortable things, in a culture that has spent 60 years telling them that effort is optional and comfort is a virtue. The woman in Augusta made the same decision every morning for decades and always came to the same conclusion, that the day was worth it, that the people in it were worth it, that she was worth it. She called it getting ready. We might want to think about calling it that again. If this video gave you something to take to your mirror tomorrow morning, take it there and share it with someone who remembers when Wednesday was worth getting dressed for. Echo of Yesterday has more of this to find. Come back next week.